Hi, my name is Joe Sanborn. I'm with the music group, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the X32 live webinar and user group. Today's topic is the X32 with the S16. I want to just mention that before we dive into this webinar, that if you want to check the schedule for any of the upcoming webinars, just go to Behringer.com and click on the community button up in the top, which will bring you into the Behringer forums. And you'll notice that there's an X32 area. Just go into the resources area there, and that will bring you in, and you can click on the link to look at any of the upcoming webinars. I also wanted to just introduce myself, as well as John DiNicola, who's also doing the webinar today. My name is Joe Sanborn, Manager of Channel Marketing with the Music Group. I'm in Los Angeles, California. John DiNicola is our Senior Product Specialist, and John is located in the New York City area. Let's start by taking a quick look at our agenda for today before we dive into the topic. And why a digital snake system? Why might you need the benefits of getting into a digital snake system? We're going to take a look at the S16 overview, just kind of take a look at the features. The physical Ethernet connections on both the X32 and the S16s. We're going to get into S16 configuration, X32 configuration to use with the S16, and we'll also have a Q&A section at the end. All right, the S16 Digital Snake. In our opinion, there's three reasons why it's a great solution: convenience, clean sound, and extremely affordable. So the main three benefits of getting into this and adding this as the next logical step to your X32 console. All right, why Digital Snake? It's more convenient. When you take a look at these two graphics down at the bottom, when I look at that big snake, I think back to my live sound days and how many shows, you're in a venue and you're taking that whole fan and you're patching that into the back of the console every night and all your mics into that snake head. It's obviously much more convenient. The right graphic shows two Ethernet connections. We got two RJ45s that just click. One clicks into the console, one clicks into the Stagebox, and all your patching's done. Another major concern right now with I'm on the West Coast with gas prices approaching $5 a gallon. Space in your truck, the amount of weight that you're carrying around out on tour. Obviously, it's drastically reduced going with a digital snake system. And in my opinion, one of the greatest benefits is as a live engineer, you're able to grab dinner because you're saving so much time not having to patch all that stuff into the board every night. I can't think of how many live shows I mixed on an empty stomach, so that's a great reason to go digital with a digital snake. Okay, why S16 Digital Snake? When you really think about where your mic preamps are traditionally located in a live environment, they're typically inside of the console, which could be 100, 200, 300 feet away from your stage. So if you get into something like the S16, what you're doing is you're putting your preamp at the stage level, at the stage location. So all of your mics that are on stage are going to be 10, 20, maybe 25 feet away from your stage box. And so your mic level signal, that super low mic signal, it's hitting the mic preamp at about 25 feet away. And then it's being preamped, and your A to D conversion is also inside of that stage box. So at that point, you're going digital from down your entire snake line. Massive advantage. You're definitely going to get a better signal integrity and better sound in general. The S16 features the same Midas design mic pre's and A/D conversion as in your X32. So if you already own an X32 and you're really happy with the way those mic pre's and the A/D converters and D/A converters are sounding in the X32, you're going to get that. You're actually going to get improved sound, but you're getting that same exact quality mic pre and conversion at the S16 stage box. Okay, why S16 Digital Snakes? It's an affordable solution. it's when you price this out, when you take a look at it, what's really cool about the S16 is it's the lowest priced digital snake solution on the market. And if you were to take a look at, in the analog days, the cost of two S16s typically is going to be less than a high quality analog snake. Um, the third benefit is you also get built-in splitter capability at the S16. I remember years ago, purchasing a splitter snake, it was well over $4,000. And when you get into a splitter snake, you have to have ground isolated transformers on every single channel. It just adds massive costs. So the S16, you're avoiding all of that with a super crystal clear, digital split. The ability to record via ADATs. Another thing is the S16s have those ADATs out on the back. So if your front of house console, if the FireWire and USB card is tied up, maybe you're using something like Waves Multi-Rack or something for for different plugins, you could also record right off of the back of those ADAT outs into whatever recording DAW you happen to be using. All right, let's take a look at the S16 Stagebox. We're going to take a look at the front panel and then the back. So on the left side, these are obviously female XLR ins. That's where your mics are going to plug. Your mics and DI boxes are going to be coming in on this side. There's 16 programmable Midas design mic preamps. And as I said, same mic preamp that's in the X32. On the right side, you have 8 XLR outputs. So obviously these are male XLRs, which are going to be driving your front of house speakers, any of your various stage mixes on those output sides. So you have 8 of those. In the top section, you just have 2 knobs to really deal with here. This is your main interface to anything you control on the S16 is through this one selector knob. So this is for adjusting gain. You can actually adjust your mic preamps directly from the Stagebox just by using that selector knob. And also this is for setting the different configurations that the S16 can operate in, because there's going to be a number of different configurations that you might get in. One S16, 2 S16s, maybe using the S16 on its own and directly going to a recording rig, whatever you happen to be doing. So that's all done through that selector knob. Okay, to the right of that is, it's just a level knob which is feeding that headphone port right there. So what's great about this is you can do basically a virtual line check. No, not a virtual line check, but you can do a line check. So from the side of the stage, let's say you forget what you plugged into channel 10. Well, you can just go to that channel and it solos right to that headphone and gives you a separate level control. Okay, we also have a few buttons. These buttons are basically for engaging your 48-volt phantom power. And also selecting if you want to adjust the gain on the particular selected channel. So that's also available right there on the front. Okay, let's take a quick look on the back of the S16. Starting on the left side, we have a USB port, and basically this really only has one use on the S16. This is for doing future firmware upgrades. We haven't upgraded the firmware on it. It might be something that we do once a year or a couple times a year, but you would do that through that USB port. Beside that is our AES-50 connections, and we have an A and a B port. And what's amazing about the S16, and really what makes this technology possible to have a digital snake system, is because the music group is a conglomerate of companies by owning Midas and Clark Technic and Behringer and Bugera and all these different technology-based companies, we're able to put something like an AES-50 port on the back of this extremely affordable S16, and this is giving us a 96-channel snake connection down on a single Cat5 wire. So that's 48 inputs and 48 outputs. So vitally important is our AES-50 port on the back of the S16. So the next port beside the AES-50 port is the Ultranet, and this is for our P16 personal monitoring system. This is a 16-channel discrete system, so you could pick 16 sources on the X32 and assign them to go to your P16 Ultranet port. And what's really cool is this runs down that same cable as your AES-50, so you're not running a separate cable from front of house. You plug in your AES-50, and then those 16 channels come out of that Ultranet port. This is one of those things that puts a smile on a lot of engineers' face when they realize that they can give, different musicians, say in a stage environment, you have a drummer or a lead singer with in-ear monitors, you could add a P16M personal mixer station right to their mic stand, and they could adjust what's feeding their in-ear monitor mixes individually for each of those 16 sources, create their own custom mix. No more, the lead singer looking over at the monitor engineer and with their finger up in the air and they can't hear what's going on. So it empowers musicians to create their mixes in the appropriate situation. So that's the Ultranet port. Right beside that is our ADAT outputs. So we have an ADAT 1 through 8 and an ADAT out 9 through 16. These are great. You could even use these just to take the direct tap right off of the mic preamps on the front side of the S16 and send these directly to your DAW. Say you're using a Pro Tools rig, and as I indicated earlier, maybe you're using your FireWire and USB card for other plugins and not recording. So you could record directly off of these at the stage with another digital audio workstation. Right beside that is our MIDI ports, and we have a MIDI in and a MIDI out. So basically what this allows is we could use something like the little BCR 2000, that's a little control surface that Behringer makes, and we could just assign rotary encoders to the MIDI continuous controller numbers for, say, the preamp gain, so that we don't have to use that single knob on the front. So we have a MIDI in and out on the back for that purpose. Let's talk a little bit now about the AES-50 technology. As I indicated earlier, this is really what makes this entire system possible. AES-50 is a digital audio networking protocol in use by Midas and Clark Technic. And as I said, as part of the music group, Midas and Clark Technic, our sister companies, it's also used on all of the large Midas consoles. And if there's one thing Midas knows, it's digital mixing technology. They make the biggest and best digital consoles on the market. They're in use by pretty much all of the top tours, AC/DC, Metallica, all the large touring bands use Midas technology. So it's a very robust technology, and this is what makes this all possible. The AES-50 supports a high channel count at very low latency. As I mentioned earlier, we're at a 96 channel, a 48 in by 48 out, and our latency is 0.3 milliseconds. This is the lowest latency of any digital mixing technology currently on the market. So that's pretty remarkable for 96 channels. Because it is a proprietary audio protocol, AES-50 signal cannot pass through standard computer hubs. Can't stress this one enough. It may, it's an RJ45 jack, but it's not going to work with traditional computer hardware. It uses a totally different protocol, so don't do that. Maximum cable distance is 100 meters or 300 feet. So pretty much any front of house type position, you should be totally set on that. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to John DiNicola, and he's going to take us through some of the setup procedures on the X32 and the S16.
Okay, great. Thank you, Joe. Hi, everybody. Good to be here with you today. There's basically 3 steps that you need to do to get the S16s and the X32 talking to each other. So we're going to go over those in detail, but let's just do a quick summary. The first thing you're going to need to do is actually physically connect your S16 and the X32. So this is where you're going to be plugging in your Ethernet cables, hopefully on your EtherCon connections, and getting everything actually connected together. Then we're going to want to configure the S16s for the proper sync settings and for the proper outputs. You have a number of different, you have the XLR outputs and ADAT outputs and Ultranet outputs on the S16s, and different modes determine what's going to get there. So it is important to have those set up correctly. Then we're going to go back to the X32 and get that set up to use the S16 inputs, outputs, and also we'll be able to check our sync on that end as well. So let's start by taking a look at a few diagrams here. This is the most basic setup. This is just a single S16 in use with the X32. And as you can see, it's just a single cable coming from the A port on the S16 going to one of the AES50 ports on the front of house console. Typically we always say it would go A to A. You could go to the B port on the X32 if you wanted to, but it is important to be on the A port of the S16 because that's what's going to allow the head amps to be controlled by the console. Let's take a look at a more common setup. This is probably the most common scenario, and this is basically going to be adding a second S16 to get all of our 32 inputs and 16 outputs on stage. And you'll notice that the S16s have dual AES50 ports. So this is what allows you to simply come out of the B port of your first S16 and connect into the A port on a second S16. So that's going to give you the ability to daisy chain the S16s. So you only have to run a single cable to front of house. And as Joe mentioned, not only does that carry your 32 ins and 16 outs, it also carries your alternate single as well. The next step up from here, I would say, would probably be adding another X32 console, maybe for a monitor console application or maybe for broadcast applications. So let's take a look at that. So now, really, all we've done in this scenario is we've added a Cat5 cable out of the B port of our monitor console, and we've sent that signal to front of house. So in this scenario, the monitor console would be controlling gain on the S16s. Just a quick note about mic gain control. With this system and with most digital snake systems, when you're talking about a digital split, only one console is going to be able to determine the mic gain. The signal is only being converted one time. So you have one source controlling the gain. So you can do control from either console. The most simple setup is what I'm showing you here, where you're actually going to have your monitor console, on stage near your S16s most likely, and then you're going to run a cable to front of house. If you wanted to have gain control from front of house instead, you would have to run another Cat5 cable from the front of house console back to the stage. The reason for this is one might try connecting to the B port, this open B port on the S16 here on the bottom, and connecting a console here, but you can't create a split here that way. So you need to be sending that off of another console. So basically what we have here is our monitor console, our front of house console has a long cable, running the stage, connecting to the S16s. And then there's a second cable that's just going straight to the monitor console.
And John, I was going to mention a lot of companies now are making great cables that have dual ethercons on each end running down a single snake line, so you don't have to run two physical Cat5 wires down. It's a much more robust solution. With the ethercon, it's putting the little plastic pieces of the RJ45 connection in a metal shell. So at the end of the night, you don't have to worry about people stepping and breaking the little plastic Ethernet connections. So it's a more robust and a cleaner setup, particularly in a situation like this where you are running two lines from front of house to monitors.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joe. Thanks for that.
Sure.
So before we move on to the next slide, which is going to kind of show us an all-out system, I do want to mention that you can, you're looking at on the right here where we have our two S16s, and you see that empty B port, and a lot of the questions that we'll get is, well, how many can I cascade? And the answer is 3 S16s can be cascaded per connection to the X32, and that's because you have a 48 by 48 channel protocol on each port. So of course 16 times 3 being 48, right? So you have, if you wanted to, you can connect a maximum of 6 S16s to one X32, one on each port, and that's going to allow you to do some cool things. Of course, the X32 is a 40 input console, so you're not going to be able to mix all of those mic preamps at once, but it would give you access to preamps maybe on another side of the stage if you're doing a bigger festival where you have one band setting up on one side, and maybe you'd have 2 S16s on one side of the stage and 2 on the other. And then as you change scenes, the console would, as you change scenes, it would change inputs. So you can do some pretty cool stuff with that. And so with that explanation, let's take a look at it. This is kind of the, not the maxed out scenario, I would say, but If you were using a front of house and a monitor console, and you had, you could put three S16s on each one and have a lot of inputs available. You could also do this exact same thing without the second console, and that would look exactly the same. It's just that instead of having these first three S16s going into here, they can just go into that other port on the other console. So pretty incredible. You can get yourself access to 96 mic inputs on stage this way.
Yeah, John, as you said, I mean, in a festival situation where you have band after band or a revolving stage type of thing, it'd be a great setup. And as you said, you just do a recall, and it recalls all of your routing to switch over to that other bank of S16s. That's a great solution.
Yeah, exactly. And you remember adding that third S16 on, as you can see, it gives you an additional 8 outputs, analog outputs that can be assigned too. So we've had scenarios where customers have gotten another S16, even if just to gain the outputs, the 8 at and the XLR outs. So a lot of things you can do with this. It's really it's a great benefit having the AS50 has such a high channel count. It lets you get into things like this.
Well, not to mention just the price of the S16 allows for this type of expansion. It's not going to
Exactly.
break the bank. I mean, it's the least expensive solution on the market, and you could, as you said, add additional boxes for extra outputs or more ADAT or whatever. That's good solution.
So that's basically the physical connections. And before we talk about setting up the S16 itself, I want to mention that the full manual for the S16 is now available on Behringer.com. And this is where you'll find the manuals for all of our products. But if you go, we just had a quick start guide for quite a while, and now the full manual is available. It looks really great. I think it's going to be really helpful for everybody. So definitely go on, check that out. You're just going to go to Behringer.com. You can search for the S16 Digital Snake. And then there's a little drop-down menu on the left side of the screen. It looks like it's on the bottom of the screen, but if you were in a web browser, this would probably be towards the middle. It's where the tabs are. And you just click on that drop-down menu, and you would click on, of course, English under Manual here. One thing you're going to want to check, if I do get some calls here and there where people are clicking that and the manual doesn't come up, you're going to need to make sure that you don't have a pop-up blocker activated, because that's going to stop the window from opening. So I mentioned that because you're going to find this chart inside the manual. You'll also find it on page 19 of the Quick Start Guide, which is where this graphic is coming from. But this chart is really important. It's giving you a nice overview of all the operational modes on the S16 and what they do. So as you can see, they're going to control what's coming out of all the outputs, and then they're also going to control sync. So what we're recommending here is, and this is really important, and I can't stress it enough, it's definitely by far the most common call we get when people are trying to get everything set up. A lot of times, especially if you're using two boxes, the instinct is kind of to say, okay, well, maybe one of my boxes has to be the master clock, especially since this is where my mics are coming in and everything else. When in reality, we actually recommend that when you're using the S16s with the X32, we recommend that the X32 provides the master clock. So to do that, you're going to be working with these first 6 modes, whereas the sync mode is external. The other 4 modes are useful for if you were using the S16s in a standalone mode, or with 888,000s or in a recording rig, as Joe mentioned. But again, for the most part, you're going to want to have them an external clock. And again, you'll notice as you look at the other modes here, once you get past once you're on external, the only other thing changing is what's at the outputs. So for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to keep it a little bit simplified, and we're going to go over the most basic setup. And that means that the first S16 would be in mode 1, and then the second S16 would be in mode 2. If you happen to have a third one, you'd put that one in mode 3. The only difference between those 3 modes is what's coming out of those 8 XLRs on the front. So of course, if you put them both in mode 1, then you're going to have duplicitous outputs. You'd have the same thing coming out of both of those banks of 8. So that's important. Let's take a look at how to change the modes on the S16. I'm going to show you a little video clip here. But basically, you just press and hold the config button. And while doing that, you can rotate the select adjust knob. So, all the way to the left, it's going to be mode 1. So as you cycle to the right, you'll be going towards mode 10. And the LEDs are indicating what mode it's in. And you'll notice as I get into the later modes where I have an internal clock, my AES50A light is blinking red, indicating that we've lost sync. And that's because I'm connected to an X32 and they're both trying to be the master clock. So the first thing you want to check, even before you try getting audio going, is that you have a solid green light here. So again, you're going to want to start by pressing and holding config and turning it all the way to the left so that you're in mode 1, which is actually the opposite of what you're seeing here. Right now, we're cycling up, and we lose the sync.
So you're basically just holding that config button down, and while you're holding that down, you're turning that data knob all the way to the left to get down to that mode 1.
Exactly, and you'll know you're there because it'll say 1 to 8. You'll be synced up, and then on the second box, you do the exact same thing, and then just click it one over to the right, and it'll say 9 through 16, and you'll be all set to go. I can't tell you how many times most calls on the S16 usually end right here, and everyone's happy. So definitely keep this in mind. Next video clip is going to show you how to set mic gain. If you had to do it from the Stagebox, you can select adjust. If you rotate that knob without having any of those 3 buttons pressed in, you're going to be cycling through the 16 inputs. So to change gain, you just select an input, and then you can press and hold the gain button and rotate that knob. So it's actually really clear when you see it. We're going to highlight 8 because that's where my mic is plugged in. Now I'm going to turn on phantom power because it's a condenser microphone. And I can press gain and go ahead and crank that gain up. So it's pretty simple. And you can see I'm getting a higher signal now into the S16.
We had mentioned in another webinar, in the scenarios that John laid out where you have, a front of house console, you have a monitor console, you're running the 2 cables so that you can get gain control out at front of house position. Obviously, the front of house guy generally needs to have immediate access to his gain. You could locate your S16s next to your monitor console, and that would also allow the monitor engineer to, adjust gain.
Oh yeah, directly from the box, yeah.
Directly from the S16 box, So as long as, the front of house engineer and the monitor guy, usually you're in communication with some sort of comm system, you could just say, hey, I need to adjust the backup singer's mic pre-up, and, you could adjust it right there on the box.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can stop somebody from from adjusting it by locking the head amps from the console. So you can,
exactly.
So you can go to the setup menu and just go to this global tab. It's the first tab that comes up. And if you use your first rotary encoder, you'll be able to highlight the words lock Stagebox like I have here. And you can press it down. And when you do, you'll see this little LED indicator light up on your S16, indicating that the head amps are locked. And then, of course, you would no longer be able to adjust the gain from the box at that point.
Which, for me personally, I mean, this is probably 99% of the time. You just would lock that so that the front of house console, is controlling that. So it's a great option to have that.
So that's the S16 configuration. So now that we have those set up, we can kind of walk back over to our X32. And the very first thing I would like you guys to notice is on the top right corner of the screen, just next to our clock, we have the box here with 4 corners, and we have some red here, and that you never want to see that. That's indicating that you're out of sync. So what I'm going to show you in this video is how to change the sync on the X32 to local, which is where you'd like it to be for this. You're going to press the setup button. First, I'm just pointing out how it's not seeing the S16 and we have red. You press setup, 1 tab over to config, highlight local sync and press it, and you'll notice right away we have green. And when you go to the routing menu, our S16 is showed up here on the right. And we have green. So it gives you a good visual right there. You can see the S16. You have green lights. That screen is always visible, just like the clock and the whole top header here, no matter what screen you're looking at. So you should always have a good indication of if you have sync. Once you have the sync set up correctly, you can go ahead and set up your inputs. You're going to want to select AES50A 1 through 8, and then 9 through 16, and so on, assuming you're using the A port. And it even gives you a little visual there. You can see that once we have sync on the right-hand side there, it actually shows us that we have two S16s connected. And if we had a third one, it would actually show 3. If you were connected to another X32, a little icon, X32 icon would come up. So if you have a big system, it's really easy to look at the routing menu and kind of see where your signals are coming from. So, of course, you're going to want to use the AES50 inputs to get your Snake inputs. The next thing you're going to want to do is route the outputs. So you're going to want to go to the routing menu, and on the AES50A page, again, assuming you're using the A port, you want to verify that you have out 1 through 8 and out 9 through 16 selected for your first 16 outputs. And what this is going to do is it's going to take the 16 output signals that you have assigned on the analog out page, the exact same signals that are coming out of the back of the X32, and it's going to send those down the AES50 so that they can come out of the XLR ports on your first two S16 boxes. This is a default setting, but if you're having trouble, you may want to check this. You'll notice on the right, these last two banks of 8 are carrying your P16 signals. So likewise, if you're plugging a P16 system into the Ultranet port on an S16 and you're not getting the right signals, you want to verify that you have P16 assigned here. And then, of course, you can assign the signals by going to the P16 out tab. And the ADAT ports on the S16 by default are going to be taking signal from output 17 through 32, these middle columns here. So that gives you a lot of options as far as what can be assigned there. But yeah, if you're not using a P16 system, you can just use these the P16 at this point is basically just a bank of virtual outputs. It's 16 assignable outputs that you can send down either your card outputs or your AES50. So it does give you a way to, let's say, for example, you wanted to get 24 outputs. So, of course, you have out 1 to 8, out 9 through 16, and you're not using the P16 system. You can assign 8 signals to the first P16 outputs, and then assign on this third AES50 column, you could assign, out. It would be P16 1 to 16, and then your third S16 in the chain would have those P16 signals. So it is really powerful. When you're when you're sending signal from one X32 to the other, you do need to go to the AES50 out page and route the signal. So in this example, I'm connected to my S16s on the A port, and I'm going to another X32 on a B port. So I'm just going to the AES50B page, and I'm saying route those signals from the other port and send them right out the B port to the next console. You do have to do that on your own, because as you noticed from the screen before, if you don't, the screen is going to look something like this. So when you're using another X32, you want it to look like this. One thing I want to mention on the outputs really quickly also is if you're using an S16 and you're doing multi-track recording, you do need to change the card output tab of the routing menu. By default, it's going to be set up for local. That's what gets your local mic preamps down to the XUF card. So if you want to multi-track from the S16, you want to make sure you go to the card out and you set it just like we see here, AES50A, 1 through 8, 9 through 16, and so on. That way the card knows, it's going to be taking the signal from the AES50, not from the local preamps. Wouldn't want you to have a multi-track session full of blank audio tracks there. So make sure you check that if you're going to be doing any recording. Resources. I want to mention a couple of resources. We recently started a new Behringer Tech Talk series. You can find it in the X32 resources area of the Behringer forum. And of course, you can get there from the Behringer website by clicking the community link on top.
Yeah, these tech talks that we're doing, we're just trying to pick topics that we're hearing. We're getting a lot of questions. John and I take a lot of phone calls from end users out there. We also watch the forums and just see what people need the most help with. So, for instance, we've been shipping S16s for the past about approximately 3 months. So it's they're getting out into people's workflows. So the first tech talk was exactly what this webinar was about: X32 with S16. So obviously use this webinar, but check those tech talks. We also did one on specifically the P16 personal monitoring system. So and we're going to be trying to add those at least maybe once a week and once every couple of weeks there'll be a new tech talk for you to check out in that resources area. As John mentioned, the new S16 manual is out, and he showed you on the actual product page where you can go and get that manual. It's really it's very well done. It really describes a lot of different scenarios. Has the MIDI continuous controller numbers for the S16, etc. So you can check that out. Also, the Behringer YouTube page features past webinars and other instructional videos. And I wanted to mention in the coming, approximately over the next 2 weeks, all of the existing X32 and S16 videos that we've been doing and webinars, they're all being added directly to the product pages. So if you go to the Behringer.com, you go to the X32 page, you might have already gone there, and there's little tabs where you can click on for different downloads that are available, maybe firmware upgrades, those types of things. Well, now there's actually a video tab that's been added. So you just go to the X32 page, click on that video tab, and then all of those resources, all those videos are going to be available. So I know there's some stuff up there now, but as I said, over the coming weeks, you should see all of the different resources for videos that we have coming up, including these webinars. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming to today's webinar. On behalf of myself and the music group, thank you for coming. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for coming, and we hope that you can come to future webinars. Those additional webinars are up on the Behringer.com. If you go to the community, which is our forum, and you go into the resources area, you can sign up for other ones, and we hope that you can attend. Thanks again for coming.